My name's Heman, William Heman. As a kid, James Bond sparked my dream of living abroad, learning languages, and seeing the world. Looking back, it's one of the main reasons I eventually moved to Poland. A couple weeks ago, I sent an email to Andreas Wisniewski's agent, honestly not expecting much. My brother Ben and I grew up watching The Living Daylights and Die Hard, so the chance to meet Andreas, whom I first knew through those films, felt almost surreal. A few days later, however, I found myself hopping on the back of Andreas's moped and riding through Berlin to a quiet park where we spent the afternoon talking, not just about The Living Daylights and Die Hard, but also about language learning, identity, ballet, Zen Buddhism, and his Polish family history. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Andreas, thank you so much for taking the time to meet me today. I wanted to interview you when I found out about your Polish roots, and of course your last name Wisniewski. I had to Google your family history. And is it correct that your Polish heritage is on your father's side?
Yes, that is correct. But yes, I'm actually a quarter. My father's father was the one who came from Poland. And that is pretty much all I know about it. I mean, for some reason, they weren't talking much about it. You know, obviously it had something to do with the times, and I'm not quite sure how that. I did some bit of digging with my grandfather while he was still alive, but he didn't want to talk about it. For his own reasons, no doubt.
And do you remember what did you ask him about, or when you mentioned the digging with your grandfather, what were you asking him about?
Well, I wanted to know how he got by with that name in the Nazi time, mm-hmm. because definitely you couldn't take that for granted, right? It's all kinds of people were discriminated against, but somehow he found a way. I do know that he was at one point given the option to change his name to Kirschbaum, which is a sort of it's Wiśnia, cherry in Polish, and he did not. And that's all I know about it. It's just a curious sort of bit, but I couldn't find out anything more. They didn't want to talk about it.
And what was his name, if I can ask? Your grandfather's name?
Józef Wisniewski.
Józef Wisniewski. And did he remain in Berlin throughout the whole war?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They didn't tell me.
Okay.
I did find some strange pictures of him as a soldier with a huge gun behind him.
Oh.
And like a massive piece of artillery. I don't know where he served. I don't know what he did. It's without context, but it was obviously him. So,
where was he from? Did you ever ask him about where in Poland he was from?
Yeah, I think what I found out was that the family seemed to stem from Poznan.
Oh, from Poznan.
But there was no direct link from sort of Poznan to Berlin. Something happened, and it's all quite obscure.
Okay.
I mean, I made some attempts to dig into it a little bit, but with a name that is so incredibly common as Wisniewski, it's very difficult.
You mentioned that even in Berlin, in the phone book, there are 5 pages of
Wisniewski.
So,
yeah, it's like Smith, basically.
Right, exactly. So almost impossible. The fact that you were raised in a home with a little bit of Polish and, of course, German culture, did that shape you at all? Did you, as a child or while you were growing up, think about your Polish heritage or your Polish last name?
Not really. I didn't think about any of it. Not the German part either. And as I mentioned, I found a set of photographs. It was not only my father's father, but I also found some pictures of my mother's father, who was an officer in the German army and apparently party member. And that's it. There's no other documentation. A few pictures, and you have to make up the rest. Or
What about when it comes to the Polish language? Did you ever hear Polish growing up? Did you hear your grandfather speaking it, or did you ever learn any words or phrases?
my grandfather didn't speak it. He didn't want to, I think. I wasn't exposed until I was already a dancer, and then of course there were a lot of Polish dancers where they have a tradition of the Eastern tradition of ballet, and so there were quite a lot of Poles there, and that was really my first exposure. And those were the first Poles that I met, and I really got to like them. They're sort of very hearty people.
What do you remember about those times working with Polish dancers? Did they teach you any Polish words, or did you try any Polish
They taught me
food or vodka? Or
Sure, yeah, of course. They taught me some words I don't want to repeat.
Okay. Yeah. The same for me. Those were probably the first words I learned in Polish. I guess that's the way it works.
Yeah, other than that, it was, I guess, what I learned from them mostly was, don't take yourself too seriously, which is a German disease. So they don't have that. They're quite relaxed about it all.
Yeah, in the Polish language they say dystans do siebie, like some distance to yourself, but
Exactly, very good.
Humility and a kind of a self-deprecating sense of humor, perhaps ability to.
Yeah, we don't have that.
You don't have. Yes, you started out. You were trained as a dancer, but then you started acting. Can you tell me about that? What that transition was like, and what it was like to transition into acting in English, a language that wasn't your native language?
Yeah, those were two steps really. The first one was to transition to basically what is the stylized language of ballet, to using your body and your facilities in a more natural way, and that happened by way of what we call dance theater, which was a sort of stream of theater that probably the most important proponent was Pina Bausch. She's no longer alive. I did similar sort of work, and it was a great relief for me to not be so restricted. Ultimately, I think my big theme is freedom.
Okay.
So very strange thing to have opted to do ballet, because it is very, very tight, right? It's just so, and you don't want to deviate too much from that. For me to suddenly use my voice and it was just like I couldn't go back to continuing with ballet. Okay. And then so I did a few of those productions with this man Johann Kresnik, whose work I loved, very, very intense work, and didn't leave anybody untouched who saw it or participated in it. And then I just so happened and stumbled upon a student film. That was my first film, and it was silent, if I remember correctly. And I moved to London after that, and I already learned on the dance theatre productions that I didn't know what to do with my voice, because you had to do a lot of shouting, and if you don't know how to do it, then you get hoarse, right? Okay. And the next day nothing comes out. So I thought I had to do something about that and acquire some technique. So I already started doing that in Germany, and continued it then in London.
But that transition was pretty quick, right? You did a student film in Germany, and then shortly thereafter moved to London.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like in London? Did you already know English well? Were you confident? I'm curious about what it's like learning to be confident acting in another language. And were you already starring in films in London?
Well, This was the second time I moved to London. The first time was the last part of my studying ballet. That it was for I think 9 months when I was 18 or 19. That really made me confident. And when you live in London, you have to learn English because nobody speaks German for sure.
Right.
So I did that, and of course, at least I was conversational, and I could say what I wanted. Acquiring some tools, you have to learn how to project so that they can hear you in the back and sound less German.
Was that was there a lot of pressure about that, sounding less German? Did you have to take classes about that?
Well, there was no pressure, but I did that, and looking back now, I didn't do nearly enough of it. I should have done it up the hill to really stamp it out, because it's actually a German accent is actually a terrible obstacle in the States.
I remember hearing, sorry if this is a digression, but thinking about, for years, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he was under immense pressure to get rid of his accent, and in the end, I don't know if he himself realized that it was a strength, and he kept it. I think he was unable to.
Yeah. It's very difficult. It's Austrian is worse, I think, is to get rid of. Some accents can almost not be eradicated. I looked into it, and most people after the age of 10 cannot sound like a native in another language.
Living in Poland as an American, unfortunately, I so often get found out right away. As soon as I open my mouth, even though I can get by in Polish and I study at the university in Polish, but of course I just can't get rid of that accent.
Yeah, I have a funny story about that. My girlfriend, British, the mother of my children, we were living in Hollywood. And we did this together, right? Because she was in showbiz also, and so we'd practice to sound more American with each other and just play with it, and we went to a party, and we said let's just go as Americans, right?
Okay.
We go there, and somebody opens the door, and she says hi. And it could have just as well been me. And he says, "Hang on, London, Liverpool," from high, trying to sound American, and it was spot on. It was like, shit, this is a hopeless endeavor.
So right away she was found out.
You're right. With high, it's uncanny. It's like it's Eliza Doolittle in.
My Fair Lady.
My Fair Lady, right? Yeah, this guy was Henry Higgins. He just one syllable and he had you.
Oh, incredible. But I have to say, I don't know how many times, of course, I've watched The Living Daylights, which is, as a kid, that was one of the first films I saw. The Living Daylights came out in 1987, the year I was born. But I rewatched it recently, knowing that I would get to talk to you, and this time I wasn't thinking so much about James Bond, but was looking at your performance, and I didn't hear a German accent.
They dubbed it. I didn't do it. They wouldn't let me do it.
Really?
Yeah. I thought by the time, with what it was, I could have probably pulled it off.
So that was your voice?
No, it was my voice.
Ah, I didn't know that. Okay.
They found some guy who sounded incredibly similar as far as timbre is concerned, but no, it was my voice.
I'm curious about your opinion when it comes to that film, The Living Daylights. What do you think? Looking back almost 40 years, what makes that such a special Bond film? Do you consider it a special film?
Yeah, I do. I think it mostly had to do with Timothy, and that was the. It's obviously a terrible position to be playing James Bond. It's just like you have to sort of make your mark and not do as everybody else has done or the others what others have done, and you have to measure up in some way, because people are going to compare you up the yin yang. But Tim's take was to take it seriously, and I think that was spot on, and that was right, and that worked. After after the
Roger Moore right.
years, yeah.
Exactly, and maybe, I don't know if audiences weren't at the time completely prepared for that, or maybe Daniel Craig has since gone on to kind of, maybe not imitate, but go
take it further, yeah,
seriously,
yeah.
And when it comes to your character, Necros, right? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
He's such a. I remember my brother Ben and I, when we watched that film as kids, we were terrified by how menacing he was. But he's such a memorable Bond villain. How did you go about creating that character?
Well, I was also trying to take it very seriously, and I dug into the psychology of what it is actually that makes people kill other people and all that stuff. Bit over the top if I look at it now, and sometimes I was very green. This was only my third or fourth film, fourth if I count them all, but very green really, and now, if I look at it now, I cringe. I always do, but especially there I cringe, and I think it could have been done so much better, so much easier, less effort, more effect.
It's hard for me to agree with that. It's just, yeah, he's such a memorable Bond villain, and so different from your villain you played a year later in 1988. So yeah, the next year, 1988, you had the next big hit, which was, in English, the title is Die Hard. Andreas, can you tell me what the title is in German for that film?
Yeah, it's Hauch des Todes.
How would you translate that?
Hauch, it's a sort of like a slight breath. A breath of death, you could call it that.
Breath of death.
Yeah, something like that.
Interesting. And have you ever heard of the Polish translation, the Polish title? Because
no.
It's quite well known, because it's an unexpected title, but it's
what
called Szklana Pułapka, which literally means the glass trap. The glass trap.
Yeah. Okay.
So they went from the perspective of the Nakatomi Plaza was
that also works, doesn't it?
So which out of those three, which title do you think best captures the essence of that film?
Well, I usually go for the minimalist version, right? So 2 syllables, straight hit. That does it for me. I think Die Hard is quite a good title.
Okay, excellent. Zen Buddhism plays a big part in your life now, is that correct?
That is, but it has actually for quite a long while.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your life has changed thanks to that? What effect Zen Buddhism has had on your life?
That's a big question. I'd say that it has given me some tools to enjoy my life more, to boil it down to that. I started practicing in 1994, and then I officially became a Buddhist in 2001, and then 2007 I was ordained, and my official title is actually Reverend.
Reverend, okay.
I'm on the bottom rung of the hierarchy, but I'm on it.
Language learning for me is one of my passions, but I, and like a lot of people on my channel, sometimes get overwhelmed by it. Sometimes in language learning there's a fear of making mistakes. Is there any insight or perspective that Zen Buddhism could have when it comes to that process, or not being afraid of mistakes?
Absolutely, hugely so. Yeah. Whatever I'm going to say about it is, only ever one angle, right? So it's whatever I'm going to say about it is not this is how it is, but that's just one side of it. So to go into it and answering your questions, there's a faculty that you get to meet that I call fuck it.
Fuck it, okay.
Right? If you can embrace that, then you have no fear to make mistakes. I don't have it at all. I speak with my hands and feet, whether I speak 3 words or 50 or 500 of the language. I can just do it. I have no obstruction to do this and make mistakes. I love languages like you do, and I've actually studied 8 languages. Not that I can speak any of them, but I studied them and I enjoy it. It basically stems from my first one was Latin in school, and at age 9 or 10 I started learning Latin. It lasted for 7 years, and I actually thought it was boring, but it has turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it's just the key to all the romantic languages, Italian and Spanish and Portuguese and France, but also even English. There's a huge Latin part, and German. It's quite amazing what it does for all these other languages. And so I have late at some later stage learned to appreciate all that.
Oh, how incredible! And that you had such a foundation in it, 7 years of studying, and then it turns out it came in handy years later. Learning
so much so. I mean, I couldn't speak a sentence of Latin, because in the way we learned it was just you learn to translate. You never learn to speak. We were taught grammar extensively, but to the day I retain a decent vocabulary, because that's what I could do. I mean, the grammar was obscure and difficult, but I retained the vocabulary, and that's all those words are the same in all these languages.
Oh, how
you just put a different ending at it, scrap some of the grammar rules, and there you have it.
Excellent. So, can I ask what languages you have studied, or what languages you know or study or would like to study?
Well, pretty much all the ones that I'd already mentioned. I did learn English in school before I lived there, but on a very, very basic level. I learned French while living in France, Danish while living in Denmark, Italian at various different stages, a little bit of Spanish. Right now I'm learning Dutch.
Okay, Dutch. Dutch is kind of surprising because the sentence structure sometimes looks like English.
It's between English and German. It's sort of just, if you just stab at it, whether it takes the English or the German way. I get it 80% right. Okay. I don't know, but I'll take a stab, and it kind of works.
Excellent.
It's beautiful. It's quite enjoyable.
How you're going about learning Dutch right now? How you like to learn a language?
App.
An app.
And yeah. And I haven't done that before, but works also.
What app is that?
Duolingo.
Yeah. Excellent. And it's good that you have such a foundation of other languages, and English and German.
Helps tremendously, yeah. I always thought, it would be nice to get one Eastern language, but they seem to all be. I mean, first of all, except for Romanian, which has a connection to Latin, the others, they're just completely different ball game, and you start from scratch, and then I always thought too hard.
I think, Andreas, this may be a big opportunity for you, because I do think that even in Polish and in other Eastern languages, Slavic languages, there are Latin roots, and it would be so fascinating for you with your many languages and experience to be able to compare that experience, learning a Slavic language, and then once you have one, I think it's like the Romance languages, you can learn subsequent Slavic languages. For me, I learned Polish for years, and then during the pandemic needed a break. But I started learning Ukrainian, which I've studied for 6 years. And
bloody hell!
But Ukrainian was so similar to Polish that I had the foundation, and now I see. I think I'm trying to learn Spanish now, but Spanish seems harder to me than another Slavic language because I feel like I finally have the grammar, the formula I understand because of Polish and Ukrainian. I would be so curious if you ever studied Polish or perhaps another Slavic language, what that experience would, what you thought of that.
Yeah, it's, well, I'm old now, so I don't know whether I can still hack that.
For sure.
Who knows?
I mean, your experience and your approach. I really do get hung up sometimes about the fear of making a mistake, but maybe it's good just not to worry about it and play with the language.
Yeah, don't you find that generally when you're in another country and you make an attempt to speak the language, that people are welcoming it?
For sure. And I went to Ukraine a year ago to practice. I've been to Ukraine several times, but I went for the first time knowing the language to some degree. And the number of free beers and nalevki, which is like the flavored vodkas, that I got for free just because I said something, and it was so fun. I made connections, and yeah, you're right that I guess I should focus on that people really appreciate the attempt to communicate.
Yeah, I'm finding that with the Dutch, for instance, like, who's learning Dutch? There is no reason to learn Dutch, right? It's like there's no body of literature. All the Dutch people speak English and French and German anyway. There is absolutely no reason to speak Dutch. So when you can say something in Dutch to them, they are delighted.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And out of curiosity, Andreas, have you gotten to practice some Dutch? Do you have someone you can practice with? Or I do. I do. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I have an ex-girlfriend who's Dutch, and we're still friendly, and we
how cool.
And we keep in touch, and
she must be excited about your Dutch language learning adventure in that
case. She likes it.
Andreas, going back to Poland, to Polish for a minute, are there any parts of Poland or Polish culture you would like to someday discover?
Oh yeah. I really want to see the country. I want to see. Krakow is top of my list for just what I've heard. Yes, I hear it's just a really beautiful city.
I've been so many times, but every time is a renewed pleasure. And if you want like a slice of that, but without all of the tourists, I really recommend Poznan, which is just such a beautiful city and very walkable, and yeah.
And I might come across some relatives even if I don't know it.
Exactly. So yeah, I would be curious, and if you're ever in Poznan, I would be happy to show you around and introduce you to some people. Maybe I'll find some Wisniewskis.
Careful, I might take you up on it.
Hey, please. Zapraszamy. That means you're invited.
Thank you.
Andreas, my last question, if you could leave my audience with one idea or one thought that has guided you in your life, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a challenge. I recently thought about it when my youngest one moved away. I thought, I want to write down a list of things that are kind of that I've learned in my life. If it's one, what would it be? It would be related in some way to what I thought I knew has, without exception, always turned out to be bullshit.
Okay.
Knowledge is vastly overrated. I might want to say, so the lesson from 30 years of contemplation, of sort of inner experience, is that I can totally trust my gut, and I should.
Trust your gut.
Yeah. And it's not what people think. It's like, I have a feeling or something like that. It's not that. It's like belly, gut, like really a deep feeling of deep conviction. It's not knowing, right? But it's sort of a confidence that it's the right thing you're doing, even if you end up falling on your face. But to trust oneself.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for imparting that, and thank you so much for taking the time to meet me here in Berlin. And yeah, I'm just very grateful for this opportunity.
Well, my pleasure, and thanks for coming all this way to just do this.
Absolutely. So thank you, Andreas. All the best.
Same to you.